Good morning, everyone. I'm Nancy Wilms. I'm a bereavement counselor with Willamette Valley Hospice. My colleague Jan DuPont will also be presenting today. She is one of our bereavement counselors. Welcome and thank you for joining us this morning. This is a very different way to have this event, but we do hope that it's just as meaningful and helpful. Just to let you know, we are recording the event, and for sound quality, we just ask that you keep your microphone off. And there could be some technical hiccups. We do apologize in advance and ask you to bear with us. COVID-19 has changed things so quickly, and we're all really adjusting. We will have time, and we certainly invite your questions at the end of the presentation. But in the meantime, you can write any question that you have in the chat box. I think if you take your cursor and hover over your screen, you'll see the icon with all the different items there, and the chat box is kind of a square box with some squiggly lines on it. That's best as I can describe it. And I think if you're watching us on a tablet, it might be configured a little different. I've talked with people who've been with us on a tablet. Oh, I'm getting some feedback. Sorry. So that might be in the upper right-hand corner. And also for those of you that were able to register before the deadline and did a memory candle, we invite you to stick around after the presentation. There will be an opportunity for you to share that if you choose. You can turn your camera on, you can turn your microphone on, and we will stop recording at that point. But we do have a lot of information to go through in the next hour or so. So we'll just go ahead and get started. Here's the outline that we're going to present today. I'll be talking about the grief journey. How do I get through the holidays when you're grieving, children and the holidays. And Jan will be touching on the rituals, support and self-care, and any questions that you have. And again, we want you to write that information in the chat box. So I'll go ahead and get started. We know that this is a really difficult time. Everything is starting to rev up for Christmas, all the merry and bright, and maybe you're wondering, how in the world are you going to get through this time? Maybe even thinking, how is the rest of the world even moving on when you're not? And possibly saying to yourself, that is certainly not how I feel. As the big year-end holidays come around and you're grieving, there's a disconnect with those emotions. It can be scary to think about, how are you going to get through this? It will be difficult at times, but we hope the information that we're able to provide today will start you on a path through the next several weeks, and will provide some detailed information on how you will be able to cope. And as we talk about the holidays, please know that we're also referring to those special days that you might have, whether it's a birthday or an anniversary or just any special day. This information that we're giving you, you can also use for those special days. But first, I want to talk about the grief journey. And it is a journey. It never ends, but it changes over time. There are many feelings and responses that you may experience. Of course, the initial sorrow that you feel. This can feel like the weight of the world and just be so overwhelming for you. That's normal. It's normal for you to feel that way when you've lost someone. The grief response, it's very personal, it's very unique. Many people might spend that time expressing the grief by shedding tears. I have a lot of family members say they cry for days after the loss, and I say, great, that's what you need to do. I'm often told that the shower is the best place to cry. When we lose someone significant, our world is just not the same. It's like a landmine has gone off and we're different. But I do want to say one thing, just kind of a caveat with that. There are some family members who I've worked with who say, I don't cry. I haven't cried. What's wrong with me? Well, there's nothing wrong. That's just the way that they grieve. So we don't want to compare. And know that grief, it takes various forms. It's not going to follow a path. We have physical responses, we have emotional responses, behavioral, spiritual. And again, everyone does, not everyone does have these. It's all different. For example, some people might have difficulty sleeping or eating. You might question, what is my purpose at this time? You may have what we call grief brain, where you're just forgetful or absent-minded. Sometimes when I'm working with families, bereaved will say, I think I'm going crazy. What's happening? I can't keep a thought in my head. That's grief brain, and that hangs around for a while. And know too that the grief experience can't be put in a box. There is no timeline to the grief journey and no roadmap for grief. For someone who likes order, this is probably going to be very difficult, a difficult experience. It can make you feel scared, out of control. It's not unusual for Jan or I to get calls from a family member a couple days after significant loss saying, they want to know when the pain will end. When will I not be sad? Well, we don't know. It's your grief and unique to you. We know that it never ends, but it does get easier to carry. You may even be familiar with Kubler-Ross theories, a great foundation, but we know that grief doesn't work that way. It goes back and forth, sideways. It is not in a nice linear motion though. And again, there is no timeline to grief. It comes in waves at different times. No boxes, no neat stages to check off or to go through. But what we do know is that grief must be processed. If you were with us at the beginning and you saw that quote, the only cure to grief is to grieve. And in terms of processing, maybe you're saying, well, what does that mean? It means that the pain must be felt in order to heal. And that's hard. We don't want to feel pain. That's the paradox of grief and healing. There are many different theories on grief, but the common thread to each of these theories is feeling the pain. As you do this, you can begin to heal. I read a quote recently. Grieving people don't need to be distracted from the pain. If they don't enter the pain, they will never exit the pain. And so often our culture wants to hurry this process, and it really can be detrimental because we begin to think, well, there's something wrong with me, but there's not. You might hear things like, come on, keep your chin up, or have you turned a corner yet? But what grieving people need when they're in pain is support and acknowledgement of what they're experiencing is healthy and normal. There is healing and reconciliation with your grief as you process the grief and mourn. The grief journey will be unpredictable. It can feel very scary and out of control. One day you might feel like things are right on track and you're doing really well, and then the next day totally lost. That's normal. You might not like that part of the journey, but it is very healthy. It's what grief is. People can get hit with a grief wave months later. I oftentimes get calls from our families 6 or 7 months after the death, and they're saying, what's wrong with me? I thought I was doing okay, and now suddenly I spent the day crying and I feel like I've had a setback. But what we know is that's not a setback. That's what grief is. And sometimes people are often wondering, am I doing this the right way? And we want you to know that it's not healthy to compare your grief with other family members or with friends or other people that have had a similar loss. Grief doesn't work like that. It's only your way. Certainly there are healthy or unhealthy ways to grieve during that journey. Abusing alcohol, reckless behavior, filling your garage with orders from Amazon, that's not healthy. But everybody has that unique and particular journey, and it's your way. So there's no right way or wrong way, but healthy or unhealthy for sure. It's also important to be aware that the other losses we've had will oftentimes come back and sort of knock at the door and say, hey, I'm here as well. I've spoken with people who tell me I didn't process that grief and now it's coming up and I feel like I'm dealing with more than one. That can happen. And even if you did have healthy responses to previous losses, they still come up and they still revisit. So it's important to be aware of this and know it can happen, because if you're not, and it does, it can be scary. Again, the grief never ends, but it does get easier to carry. It's really, really important to be kind and compassionate with yourself. I know that's so easy to say, but oftentimes it's very hard to do for all of us. But in grief, this is really important and goes a long way in the healing process. So if you were to think about a friend who had a loss, and maybe the kindness and compassion that you would give them, turn that inward and be ready to forgive yourself for any regrets as well. Grief is hard work. We know that's true. Take all the time that you need in the healing journey. We do learn to carry the sadness and the pain, and it does get easier to bear and softer. I say that over and over because it is true. And understanding the journey is important in being able to move towards a healing. And so, again, understanding the grief will help. So let's go ahead and talk about the tips on coping with the holidays. Again, use this for the holidays that are coming up, but also think about using it for any special days that you might have. I'm going to be giving information from James Miller book, How Will I Get Through the Holidays? 12 Ideas for Those Who've Lost a Loved One. If you registered and picked up one of the candles to make, you probably received that book. Maybe you've read it, maybe you haven't. But the quote here, I'll go ahead and read it. We have such strong traditions and strong memories around the holidays that use all of our senses, the taste and smell of food, sounds of music, prayers, touch, and feeling. The hugs and love from people, such visceral and strong memories can trigger memories of our loved ones, and grief just comes up from that. So it's very powerful. And starting with the first part, know that there will be pain. There will be difficult moments, but it does not mean that it will be horrendous. Sometimes the anticipation is worse than the actual experience. I remember a person in one of our groups who was distressed thinking about a wedding anniversary that was coming up and how the family was going to be spending it, and they wanted to do it the way they always had, and she wasn't sure she wanted to do that and how it would be, and just built it up that it was just going to be this horrible thing, and sort of had a backup plan of what she would do, and it ended up being okay, but she was realizing that there could be pain, so that was helpful. Feeling whatever it is you need to feel. You're human, and you will have an emotional reaction to the holidays. You may have sadness, anxiety, fear, anger, even apathy. Don't be ashamed of how you feel. That's how you feel. You might even feel some joy. Don't feel guilty about that. The third one, expressing your emotions. So I just described all these emotions that you might feel. So it's good to not let those build up. You need to have an outlet. That's important. You don't want to explode on any family members or a friend. If you need to cry, cry. If you need to talk to someone, do that. A lot of people journal. That can be very healthy. Maybe listen to music, create something. Again, don't let it build up. The fourth one, planning ahead. That's really important. Talk with people who are in your support circle. Think about doing a small task, one thing at a time. Don't take on anything big, no big projects. And it's important to know that you can change your plans if you need to, even if you have something set at the last minute. If you need to change, change. If there are children in the family, include them in the planning. And remember, you don't have to plan all the holidays for the rest of your life. You can do something different the second year or the third year if you want to. The fifth tip is take charge when you can. Think about and evaluate the traditions that you want to hang on to. I'm not going to go into great detail with this because Jan is going to talk about that a little bit later. I know that people do make changes all the time. With COVID-19, this might be giving you the permission to scale back. Turning to others for support, number 6, that's really important. Ask for help when you need it. Sometimes that's hard. We oftentimes want to give help to others, and it's difficult to accept that help. And don't think that someone should know what you need. Tell people what you need. Maybe it's as simple as letting people know you want them to say your loved one's name. That's important. You know who the helpers are in your life. Turn to them. I know this is really difficult and a lot, but there's also virtual support out there, just like you're using the virtual support today. And number 7, be gentle with yourself. I kind of talked about that in the grief journey. Sound familiar? Don't overcommit yourself. Allow yourself, again, to cancel your plans. I had one woman who said, well, I'm just locking my door. If my kids knock on my door, I'm not letting them in. That's the way she was having self-care and being gentle to herself. And don't feel guilty for that. Being in grief, that's a time it's okay to be selfish. That's what grief is. Number 8, remember to remember. This is one way of ensuring that you carry your loved one with you. I think one fear that people have is that their loved one will be forgotten. And again, this is one that Jan will talk more about in creating rituals and ways to honor your loved one and remember them at this time. Number 9, this is important in staying present in the moment. Accept the love and the warmth you receive. Be open to the positive feelings that come your way. Grief and gratitude can walk side by side. I know that's hard, thinking, well, it's difficult to count blessings, but grief and gratitude, they don't cancel each other out. In fact, studies show that being able to maintain some gratitude during the grief journey can help in that healing. I have to admit, I have a confession. Number 10, lowering your expectations. That's not actually from James Miller, but that's one that I felt was important and put in there. Go easy on yourself. The holidays will not be the same as they were in the past. It's possible that no matter what you do, you still may not feel joyous as you have in the past. This doesn't mean that you can't enjoy the day, though. So just kind of lowering those expectations. It will not be the same as it was. Number 11, doing something for others. You can find moments, if you can, to place your attention outside of yourself. Help someone else where you can. You're going to know what you can do even if it's calling a neighbor that is living alone and with COVID-19, not having a lot of interaction, whatever you can do. And 12, harbor hope. That's really important. Stay open to the demands of this experience. There is hope for healing. We're not alone. Most of us are struggling due to the pandemic. Still, it isn't impossible and may help in surviving the holidays and the first, if you're able to harbor that hope. And if you have the James Miller book, read it or skim it if you can. Whatever you can do, that will be good. Next, if there are children in the home, children are just as confused and hurt as you are. They're grieving the loss. They may not know how to express what they're feeling. It can come out in different ways. Be prepared to know that children will model your grief. I had one person call me one time and they said, I'm really worried about my son. He's not expressing anything. And so I was talking to the mother and kind of asking her how she was expressing her grief. And she said, oh, well, I go in another room. I don't do anything in front of him. So if that's really important, they're going to model what you're doing. Teens may already be kind of moody, and a loss can add a layer of complexity. They might be trying to protect you. It's important you don't want to use them as a crutch in talking with them about certain things. Make sure you have someone else you can turn to. Kids, they want to be with their peers. Don't be surprised if they're wanting to spend special days with other friends. Due to COVID-19, this may or may not be an option. Certainly it's changing things. Perhaps they're wanting to do Zoom visits with a friend instead of being with the family. But that peer support can be really important, especially if they're not able to talk about how they're grieving and they can with a peer. So some things that you can do. Being able to come together and doing something on that special day can be very healing and important. It can be as simple as making that person's favorite meal, watching a holiday movie that person loved, gathering and telling stories. Just know that the first, even the seconds of those special days can be difficult. I hope there's something that resonated with you and might be helpful and bring you comfort in what I just talked about. I'm going to let Jan talk more about the traditions and the rituals that will be healing at this time. And again, remember, if you have any questions, we invite them. Just put them in the chat box and we'll get to them at the end. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm going to follow up on what Nancy said. And I would like to take a few minutes to talk about traditions, rituals, and ways to remember and reflect on our loved ones. I am also going to talk about self-care during this time and stress. We have so much stress from COVID and grief. We really need to talk about self-care today. So during this time in our lives, we're confronted with grief, like I said, but also the impact of COVID. And we have to do even more planning and how can we do anything with all this? And we're grieving. So how do we handle our time-honored traditions when our lives are so shattered and confused? Do we just skip them or find a way to change them? How do we remember, reflect, and include those we've lost during the holidays and special days? Rituals are some of the ways to remember. And like the slide says, they can be big or small. They don't necessarily have to be big events like we used to have before COVID, but they can be small, little meaningful times. When we include remembering our loved ones, the holidays and special days seem less empty, and our lost loved ones don't seem so far away. The next slide lists a few ways to remember, but there are so many other ways. Some people have a memory garden. Some people do some other things. I had a friend that had a memory garden and started with just one tree. Someone had given her a tree. And now she has 2 trees and several plants and a gate. Every Memorial Day, she hangs flags for her loved ones, and then also removes the flags from the last year and burns them in a special ceremony. Some people have found volunteering to be a special way to honor their loved ones. And during COVID, there's still ways to volunteer that are safe and helpful. Some people just drive to a special place that their loved one enjoyed and stay there for a while. So rituals can be anything that you want to make it to help you remember your loved ones, especially during the holidays and special days. And what about traditions? Ask yourself, what's the most important? What do you really want to keep? Do you want to just skip the holidays, like Nancy said, and lock your door to people, and that's okay too? No matter what you do, try and find meaning and include your family as much as you can in your decisions, because everyone's hurting right now. Everyone's grieving. Remember that this year may be the most difficult time in your life, and you can change traditions and holidays and activities again, and you can change them the next year and the year after that. Grief is ever changing, and it's important to remember that. It's not going to stay the same all the time. Every day is difficult, but finding ways to remember and reflect and honor our loved ones can be so helpful. Because we are grieving the loss of our loved ones, and during a real turbulent time anyway in our world and our country, we're facing COVID and other challenges, finding ways to care for ourselves is so important. And people say, well, what is self-care? Well, it just means caring for yourself. Sometimes it may be just getting out of bed in the morning or taking a shower. And at Christmas time or the holiday time or whatever you're celebrating right now, all around people seem so happy. There's lights and maybe canned music in the stores, and you don't feel happy at all. Sometimes we may feel like hiding somewhere. So how can we bring light into our lives during this time? Remember, it's okay to not feel like celebrating the holidays, but we need to find ways to take care of ourselves and help us cope with our sadness. Some ways are listed on this slide that's showing right now. Remember to take care of yourself. Some of the most important ways are breathing, eating, and exercise. Breathing, you think, well, I breathe every day, but believe it or not, there's been studies on stress that show that we don't breathe as well when we're grieving or stressed. We breathe shallow. So just remember that deep breaths, taking a deep breath once in a while is important and helpful. Helps calm us, helps deal with difficult emotions. Take a moment just now to take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath and let it out slowly. If we do this from time to time, it really does help. Another way to take care of ourselves is to eat. Eat healthy. When we are grieving and stressed, some people tend to eat more, and it's a comfort to them. But maybe it's not what they want, but they just need to eat. Some people find themselves not eating hardly at all and start to lose weight. So we need to eat to keep our strength up and avoid getting sick ourselves. Making meals that are small can also mean they can be healthy and nutritious. Another thing that's important is exercise. It doesn't have to be strenuous or anything like that. It can just mean taking a few steps. One widow I'm working with is in her 80s. She didn't feel like she was recovering at all. She was crying all the time. Her doctor suggested she just get out and walk a little, especially on good weather days. So she did. She started taking a few little short walks and she began to feel better. So exercise is a good way to take care of ourselves. Maybe see your doctor for a checkup. I think that's always important, especially if you've been a caregiver or been through grief. Seeing our doctor. Your doctor can recommend medications to maybe help you sleep and other health problems you may be experiencing. The medications won't stop the grief, but they can help us cope. Reach out to others for support. That's another good way to take care of ourselves. Sometimes people attend a grief group, a grief support group, or some people just find a chat online, a chat room online that they can talk to others without going out of the house. And right now, because of COVID, we're doing virtual groups, and you can always look at our website and learn more about those grief groups. See a counselor if you need to. Sometimes you just need to talk to someone one-on-one for a while and work through things. That's always important. Setting boundaries is also important. It's okay to say yes or no. You don't have to attend everything that you're invited to. And you may need time to help you recover as you grieve. And that's important. Realize that this holiday season doesn't have to be the same as last year, like Nancy said. Every first, and maybe every second, and maybe every third will be a challenge. But I think especially during this first year, it's hard. Let me share a few lines from this quote that I found. The journey of grief can seem bleak and lonely. Look in front of you. There are others encouraging and guiding you. Look beside you. There are others on the same journey. Look behind you. There are others encouraged by you. We are not alone in this journey. That came from the Grief Toolbox. Thank you. I'm glad that you made it this morning. I hope that information that we've shared has been helpful. And we had talked about putting questions in the chat box, so do you have any questions? Thank you.
Laura is our MSW student intern, and she's monitoring the chat box. Do you see any questions, Laura?
Good morning, everybody. No, I don't. I've been checking throughout. Nothing yet.
Okay. I know it's a lot of information that we gave, going over the grief journey, then going over James Miller's book just briefly, and Jan's information.
So we have two that came in just now. We have one from Maya, says thank you all for the helpful information. And then David wants to know a little bit more about the Grief Toolbox. And then Kristen would like to know if you have suggestions of new traditions that may be extra helpful.
Okay, well, I can answer the one on the Grief Toolbox. That's actually a website with really helpful information on grief. So it's just called the Grief Toolbox because you can reach into it and find tools, and it's online.
In terms of some traditions, I'm not sure what Jan was, if you had any, but I know that I've had families say that maybe they start a tradition where they have a total new event. Maybe they go to the coast for the day, travel together if it's a place that their loved one enjoyed being, and just spending that time there. It can kind of feel like that person is with you. That is one tradition that I know I've had actually several people say that's something that they do. I don't know, Jan, if you've had other family members talk about different traditions or that they start something new.
Some families hang stockings, and some people have bought stockings for their loved ones and hung them too. And some people buy gifts And they're for others. They buy gifts for others, but they wrap them under the tree, and that's to honor their loved ones. So that's like a Christmas holiday tradition. Like I said, there's many ways and many traditions that we have, and we can kind of change them a little bit to honor our loved ones.
I hope that was helpful. And you're going to know what you can do, what you're able to do, the personality of your loved one, what might have real meaning and be very special for you.
I wanted to say I have one woman I'm working with right now that's going to cook some special dishes that her mother loved. And so that's her, she's changing that tradition because her mom's not here. And so she's going to cook some of the dishes that her mom loved to cook. And she loves to cook too, so that fits her lifestyle. So that's another tradition too.
Any other questions? We do have some extra books of the James Miller Coping with the Holidays, and so if you registered after the deadline and you would like one of those books, you can just give us a call. Our office is open, you know, kind of the 8 to 5 hours, definitely Monday through Friday. Saturday hours are different, Sunday hours. You can call, schedule a time if you want to come and pick up one of those books. That's available too.
And also just know that you can check our website and see all the information on upcoming support groups or any other virtual events that we're offering right now. And so that's all at wvh.org. Yes,
and due to COVID-19, everything is virtual, our drop-in groups and our 6-week groups as well. But keep checking back for other events that we have.
And you can always call us at Bereavement Services at Willamette Valley Hospice and ask questions too.
We've had a couple questions get posted. One of them is, can you talk more about the anxiety of the unknown with COVID, connecting to remembering the anxiety of the upcoming death anniversary?
Well, definitely when you're looking at the death anniversary, there's a lot of anxiety that happens. You start to remember how it was the previous year, if your loved one was on hospice, maybe what their decline was like, all that you went through, and it's almost like you're reliving it. If it was a sudden death that didn't have anything to do with a hospice death, then also you're going to be thinking about how that happened, what occurred, and it will cause some anxiety. And with COVID-19, there's another layer because we don't know what's happening. Things seem to change all the time. Just recently with Governor Brown's new stay-at-home order, how things are changing, the rates of diagnosis are going up. So there is that anxiety that will be there. I think some of the things that Jan talked about for self-care, how can I care for myself at this time? Spending a little bit of time maybe meditating or remembering to breathe, taking those deep breaths, remembering what can I do for self-care? It doesn't have to be anything big. It can be, like Jan said, taking a shower, washing your hair, just knowing that this will end. We just don't know when in terms of the virus and what is going to happen. But think about some of those tips we gave and how those might be able to be helpful for you and use those.
Another question, I seem to count the months of my husband's death every month. Will this lessen? Yeah. It has been 7 months.
7 months. It probably will. We call that grief math, where it's first of all, you're counting, it's been a week, then it's been 2 weeks, it's been a month, it's been 2 months. It will probably lessen. It doesn't mean that it will ever go away, but that pain or sadness or the intensity that you feel as you count those days, it's been 5 months, it's been 6 months, it's been 7 months, and kind of that overwhelming feeling, that is what can lessen, and that is what can feel easier and softer, easier to bear. That's one thing that Jan and I often say, is it gets softer. Grief gets softer. It doesn't ever go away, but the grief math will change. That's a great question.
Another question that is posted is, will we get a copy of your slideshow?
I'll check and find out. I'll ask my boss how we can do that, or our IT people, and see what we can do. I know people that registered, we have your email address, so it might be a way where we can just send that to you. I'll have to find out though. We'll do what we can. Let me see.
I think if anybody wants to send us their email address, we can probably help them out with that.
Yes, you can send it to bereavement.org. That is our email address, and we will get that.
Bereavement.wvh.org or just bereavement.org?
I thought it was just bereavement.org.
Bereavement@wvh.org, maybe. So is it time to do candles?
Yeah, if we don't have any more questions, do we have any more questions? Sometimes I know my brain, I don't always think of something right away, and so.
We don't have any right now showing up.
So what I'll do is I will stop recording. Because this is more personal, sharing information. We invite you to share your candle. You can